So now we know what an operating system is. Now, what is virtualization? So you mentioned that you believe that virtualization was about running multiple operating systems on the same machine. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Right. That's basically it, honestly. So why would you even care to do that? Do you have any ideas why you'd want to run multiple OS on a single PC?
I guess one reason, which would have to be a very specific kind of term or specific requirements, was if someone was testing out a piece of code and that
Right.
somehow it just goes awry and deletes a very important file on the computer. With a virtualization machine, it wouldn't do that. It would keep your computer intact without breaking anything.
That's a good point. So I want to run a sensitive piece of code, for instance. So, like, for instance, have you ever used Photoshop?
No.
Okay, let's assume you have.
Okay.
Do you pay for it?
Mm,
It's okay. You can say it.
no,
The FBI is not gonna come after you.
thank God.
So, especially since you said you never done it, but like you wouldn't pay for it. Then how do you do? Because you're not gonna pay $10,000 to use Photoshop, right?
I know.
Right. So what do you do?
I download a file which has already been cracked.
You download a crack. So a
Yeah.
crack is essentially a version of Photoshop of which the source code has been modified a little bit.
Yeah.
That's terrifying, isn't it?
It is.
Because you don't know what you're downloading. Like, there could be anything. Right? And in fact, in most cracks, whether it's Photoshop or games or anything like that, you always, like, you can't, the assumption you have to make is that there is some form of malicious code in it.
Which is probably a malicious code to modify the source code, as you said earlier.
Actually, what I mean is that the source code has been modified and includes a malicious code in it.
Oh.
So it runs malicious code on your computer.
Okay.
Right. And usually that can be a Trojan, that can be a keylogger, that can be even something as simple as a botnet. But it's basically nothing that you want to run on your PC.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, you'd like to isolate that. You'd like to say, I want to use Photoshop for free. There's going to be a virus in it. I want to put it in like a box, just use it for my like picture editing or whatever. And then do nothing else and like isolate only that so that if there's something dangerous happening, it at worst it only fucks up that one isolated part of my PC.
Yeah.
Right. So let's say you're running your Windows install. Let's make it blue. You're running your bare metal Windows install because at the end of the day, you still need a bare metal operating system.
Yeah.
You want to install that malicious piece of software because, you know, you like to live dangerously. So what a virtualization software will do is it will mimic a second computer inside your computer. And then in that virtualized computer, it will run another operating system.
It's a bit like computerception.
It's exactly that, actually. You have a copy of Windows. Here you have a second copy of Windows. So suddenly you have two copies of Windows running on the same machine, but we have specific terms. The outside, the bare metal Windows install is what we call the host.
Yeah.
And the inside one, the virtualized one, is what we call the guest.
Okay.
So what you'd want to do then is, yes, install the sensitive software on the guest operating system.
Is it possible for a file from the guest operating system to make its way to the host operating system without you knowing about it?
It is possible. It's very specific, but it is possible. The
Oh,
isolation is never perfect, right?
yeah,
Okay, so if we're talking about if we need to talk about security a little bit, security is relative. Is as
yeah,
in there is no perfect security. What you want to do is you want to make it as expensive and unlikely for whoever is attacking you to succeed.
yeah,
That's the point. But you cannot have a perfect protection. But you can make it not worth it. Or really, really hard. That's the
okay,
case for encryption, for instance. If you encrypt something, at worst, it's going to take very, 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 very long to decrypt it, to brute force it. But it's always feasible, right? It's like you
yeah,
have a big number combination, right? You have to guess, let's say, 10,000 numbers.
yeah,
Well, it's going to take you forever to try every combination, but
yeah,
it is possible. Maybe you can randomly find the correct one.
yeah,
Okay, so yeah, security is never perfect. In the case of things like keyloggers and stuff,
mhm,
so the better way of doing it is, first of all, in my opinion, so this is not professional advice, right? I'm not saying that this will protect you. But I am saying that a good practice would be, for instance, to run instead of running the same operating system twice for the host and the guest, what you could decide to do instead is, let's say, run a Linux host. Hold on, a Linux host and a Windows guest. So suddenly the software, like it means that the software, the malicious software you've installed, has, first of all, has to figure out that it's running on a Windows VM, and
yeah.
once it makes its way to the Linux
Well, it
host,
can,
it has to already be prepared to infect a Linux host. So that's very unlikely,
yeah, because yeah,
right? It's not impossible, but it's very unlikely. And the cost of developing a piece of malicious software like this, the cost is like,
expensive.
yeah, it's very expensive. It's very, and especially because, so it'd be very expensive to develop, and it's so specific. Like how many people are you going to infect with a malware like that? How many people are running a Windows guest inside a Linux VM specifically?
We don't know for sure because
Not many, not that many. That's for
really,
certain. Well, of course, if like let's talk about Photoshop again. The example of a cracked Photoshop. Who installs Photoshop? Who uses Photoshop cracks?
well, those who are probably going to use it once or twice and don't want to pay for a full service.
Well, yeah, right. Like end users, like John Smith and whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think John Smith runs a Windows VM inside a Linux host?
No, the other way around since Windows is more popular, right?
Well, do you think John Smith even knows what virtualization is?
Good point.
Exactly. In fact, most of the people that are going to be downloading that piece of malware don't even know what virtualization is. So, is it really worth it developing a piece of malware that would infect maybe like 5 people?
No.
No, it's not. So they don't care. So that's why it's better. Like I said, you want to make it economically not viable for people to try and infect you.
Yeah. All right.
It's like, I love that analogy. It's like you and your friend are walking in the woods and suddenly you run into a bear.
You just have to run faster than your friend.
Exactly. You don't have to outrun the bear. You have to outrun your friend. And you live.
Yeah, but your friend dies.
Who cares? He should have been faster than the bear. No, but seriously, that's how it works. You just
Yeah.
you just make it so that it's better Like you want to make yourself as unattractive as possible.
Yeah.
And end users like you and me, as long as we put like simple defenses into place, there is like barely anything that a hacker could possibly get out of us. Like for instance, if a professional group of hackers really want to infect your network, they will. They won't have any issue doing that. But it'll take them a lot of resources, and what are they going to get out of it? At best, they're going to ask for ransom, like they're going to sell all your data and ask you for a ransom to like get your data back. Like they're going to lock your data and ask you to pay like $10,000. Do you think it's worth? It's not worth the $10,000 for them to like go to these lengths. As long as you have a simple firewall in place, that's enough for them. That's enough like to deter them. That's enough to say, hey, it's going to be really expensive for you to get barely anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be a good act. Like this is a good example of when I personally like to use VMs. Is precisely like, hey, I want to install a piece of software. I'm not sure I can trust it.
Okay.
Another case would be still in the idea, still like for end consumers like you and me. Let's say you want to. There's a freemium software you'd like to use. Let's see, for instance, what's a good example? So you want to try a free trial. Let's keep free trial for Photoshop. I don't know if there's a free trial for Photoshop, but let's say there is.
7-day free trial for Photoshop.
Right, 7-day free trial.
Isn't not worth it.
Well, hold on. So you want your 7-day free trial?
Yeah.
You don't want to install the crack.
No.
Okay. But obviously, you're gonna have a problem. First of all, the trial is linked to your account.
Yeah.
Okay, you can just you create a throwaway email. You have services dedicated to doing that, free services. So you create a throwaway email. You create a new account. Takes you 2 minutes. And if you use Photoshop for like if you use Photoshop for your personal YouTube channel or something, maybe it's worth it. You spend 10 minutes every day, like every week, renewing your free trial. Maybe that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. But then you run into an issue is that Photoshop is not stupid. They're like, no, you can't install a Photoshop free trial on the same machine twice. You can't
Because
do that.
Hardware.
Right. So what they will do is they will actually check some serial numbers, some MAC addresses. And we're not going to go too much into detail as to what this means. But essentially, they're going to track what piece of hardware the Photoshop trial has been run on.
And then if the same pieces of hardware reappear,
It just says, no, you've already used it. Like, you can't.
Yeah.
Right.
One of my friends got hardware banned on Apex.
On what?
That's Apex Legends.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he was supposedly aimbotting even though he just lucked out.
Well, that's unlucky.
And so he had to, I forgot which service it was, but he had to download something to change the serial number of like his graphics card or something, and then make a new throwaway account for Apex.
So most likely it was to change the serial number of his motherboard.
I think so.
Yeah, that's usually how it works to track. So for instance, that's also how it works in Windows. Okay. Windows will track what activation key has been used on what motherboard.
Okay.
But then, okay, so you need to change your serial number, your motherboard serial number pretty much every single time, right? Like every week. But obviously, like if you were to do that on your bare metal install, you'd have to buy a new motherboard every week and rebuild your computer from scratch.
No thanks.
Yeah, let's not do that. Or you can spend $10,000. Yeah, let's not do that.
No, bank account isn't big enough.
Exactly. So you can just go for the crack, or if you want to make sure that there is no like security breach, what you can say is, well, since I'm virtualizing, like so what I do is I run a Windows VM, right? I install Photoshop on it. But every time, what I'm going to do is every single week, so I will copy this, right? I will copy this. I will do what's called a snapshot.
Okay.
So think of a snapshot as like you're taking a picture of everything going on in a computer at one given time. So you're taking a picture of the RAM, of the memory. You're taking a picture of the hard drive, of like the all the components, all the devices, everything running on the PC right now. You just take a snapshot. You just take a picture of it and you save it. And you save that picture. And
Yeah.
then what you can do is you can tell the virtualization software, you can tell it, hey, here's a snapshot. Please generate a VM from it. Like it's like you're copying the VM. And you can't really do that. Like it's much more versatile than, let's say you want to back up your bare metal Windows install.
Yeah.
You have to use a specific tool that will do that. And if the tool, like that tool will take some time to run, if your PC for some reason shuts down during the process, like you lose everything, it's very scary, right? It's not very flexible. A snapshot is not instantaneous, but there is there is no risk that I know of, at least, of like breaking your machine, neither your guest nor your host. So
Well,
it's
that's
much more versatile,
Yeah.
right? And so what you can do is you take a snapshot, and then you're going to copy it later in a new. So you delete that machine, and then you put it in a new machine, and you change the serial number.
Okay.
So Windows might, not be too happy about that for a moment. That's fine. You let Windows do its thing until it's properly working again. And then Photoshop is like, oh, hey, that's a new serial number. Let's install the free trial.
Because it isn't the same thing.
Exactly. Now, obviously, there is not an infinite amount of serial numbers. For something I don't know to what frequency you will, I don't know to what frequency you're going to run into used serial numbers for something as popular as Photoshop.
Yeah.
So it's actually kind of funny. But there are lots of serial numbers still, and that would be a viable strategy. There is some overhead to doing this, obviously. Like you're spending, I don't know, maybe it would take you maybe 15, 20 minutes every single week to do all this. But again, that might be worth it.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is not worth it in an enterprise setting.
No.
No, because in an enterprise setting, you need people working like actually all the time. And in an enterprise setting, you will pay the $10,000.
Because, well, it's an enterprise. You have the money.
You have the money, and that way you also have the Photoshop support, like the Adobe support. Right?
Yeah.
It's not like again, an enterprise will money is less important to an enterprise, to a company, than service, than support.
Okay.
Right. So that's why you have so many features. Like even from manufacturers, like you have I remember weird stuff coming from Intel that would let you I don't remember how it's called, but that would let you, it's some form of remote access to your hardware, and that thing is like super expensive and not working too well. But and you have like free alternatives to that. But in an enterprise setting, you'll just go with the Intel thing, even though it's literally worse, and even though it costs money instead of not costing money, simply because if something doesn't work, you call and you just phone Intel and it works.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So this is like the second case for like consumers for why they want to do virtualization. And the third example is what we are actually going to do. Well, if we have the time today, I didn't think we'd be taking so long, but this is fine. Like this is fine. We can do it maybe in two sessions.
Yeah, it's better to understand everything in one moment instead of having
Yeah,
to repeat
I'm thinking we might actually do that. Up to you also. So
Yeah.
remember what we want to do. Let's see if I can zoom out. Okay, so we said later on, like for the VPN lab, so to test out VPNs, we're gonna have to run multiple operating systems, right? We want to run a Linux machine and a pfSense machine and a Windows machine all at the same time. Do you have 3 computers laying around that you can install 3 different one operating system on each of them?
Hell no.
No, you don't, right?
Nah, 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 nah,
You
nah,
definitely do not. How yeah, no, you don't. You don't, right? It's
no.
very expensive to do that. So
I have
instead, what we're
people
gonna
lying around, but they're not parents. I'm pretty sure they would kill me if I changed anything.
right, and also exactly right. So you'd have to like do permanent modifications to your computer's hard drives and possibly mess up like the already pre-existing Windows installs and stuff.
Yeah, no, I'll
So
pass.
just as a side note to that, there is actually a thing called dual boot, where you have one computer and two different operating systems installed on it. So, for instance, Linux and Windows. And what you do is at boot, you decide which of the two you want to run. At boot.
Okay.
So you only run one at a time, but you can decide which one.
Yeah.
I'm personally not a big fan of dual booting. Like it was very prevalent before virtualization was really like so democratized. Today I wouldn't recommend it because why dual boot when you can just run a VM,
Fair point. And
right?
I'm guessing it might be a lot simpler to just run a VM either way.
Well, technically you have better performance on dual boot.
Oh.
But if what you're doing is run like so, okay, if you need two operating systems and you actually need both of them to be very performant to use all the performance of your machine, then
Yeah.
sure, you have to dual boot. But this is very rarely the case. Usually you have like one main operating system for which you want high performance. So in our case, that would be Windows, right? You want that to be your main OS because you want to run games on it. Like just that, you're going to need high performance. And
Okay.
then maybe you want your secondary operating system to be Linux. Just because, you want to learn Linux, you want to try things out on it. But it doesn't matter if it doesn't have high performance,
Yeah.
right? Like what we're going to do is just labbing. Just to lab, we don't need high performance. We need like one CPU core and that's it.
Yeah.
So if you want to install two operating systems, you can do that. So dual booting is like when you have two operating systems on one hard drive.
Okay.
You have yet something else, which is not dual booting, but it kind of feels like that. Is you have two operating systems on two hard drives, right? So you have your Linux install on maybe like an HDD on
Yeah.
a physical hard drive, and then you have a Windows install on your SSD, let's say.
Yeah.
It's not dual booting, but it still sort of has. So this second, so this method with two hard drives is not bad. You do get high performance, and because the two operating systems are installed on two separate hard drives, you have better isolation.
Yeah.
Right, they're better isolated, so you have less risk of like Linux messing with Windows or Windows messing with Linux. I've had
Okay.
that happen to me before where I was running dual boot, so two operating systems on the same hard drive,
Yeah.
and then I got rid of one of them because I felt like I was never using it. And
Yeah.
then that actually messed up some things for my Windows install, for the
Oh,
other
wow.
operating system. Thankfully, I was able to recover everything, but
Yeah.
like it was a matter of partition management. But it's not trivial. It's really not trivial. You don't want to like you want to avoid dual booting. In my opinion, it's not a viable thing to do in 2020.
Okay.
But just know that you can do it, and that, for instance, let's say you want to. So when you install, for instance, Linux, when you install it, it often asks you, "Hey, do you want to like we've detected an installation of Windows on your computer? Do you want to wipe the installation, or do you want to install it alongside Windows?"
Okay.
Right? And if you want to install it alongside Windows, that means you have the option of dual boot, meaning installing the two of them on the same hard drive.
Yeah.
Right? If you have two hard drives, you still want to install them like alongside each other, but it'll give you the option to install them on separate hard drives.
Okay.
So what we will be doing is we will be running one Linux host, one Windows host, and one pfSense host. So we're going to be running 3 operating systems. I think that's really cool. Right?
It is.
You're running multiple operating systems on the same machine. And it's so fun because now you're treating operating systems like they're just software, right? Like Windows is just a piece of software now. Linux is just a piece of software.
Okay.
Right? I mean, yeah, we're installing Linux, we're running Linux, uninstalling it, modifying it, copying it. It's essentially a software, right? Just like, I don't know, Valorant or any game, or just like Photoshop. Like, you're treating it like it's just a software.
Yeah.